Okay. And welcome everybody. We just finished one session, so I apologize. We're just going to get started a couple of minutes late here. I see everybody's filing in, which is really great. Thank you for your patience. I'll just give it another minute. While we're waiting, feel free to add in the chat function where you're joining from today. It's always nice now that we're the one silver lining with COVID is that we can now be reaching a much more global audience, which is also very exciting. So we have Paris, the Netherlands, Ottawa, Brooklyn, Amsterdam, Germany, Finland, Lagos, wow, lots, Vancouver, Toronto, amazing, England, New York. This is all so great. Okay. So everybody's filing in. Wonderful. Maybe I'll just wait till we get to around 100 and then I'll kick off. Oops. Okay. Great. Well, welcome back to our third and final session in our October WEAR webinar series, Fabrics of the Future. Some of you probably had joined us earlier today. We've looked at decarbonizing the fashion industry from a raw materials perspective, and we just finished a very interesting session learning more about sustainable sourcing of raw materials. So yes, just a couple matters of business for the questions that you have for Georgia at the end of her presentation. Please use the Q&A function. Keep only comments. If you want to share links, things like that, use the chat function for that. So I guess we'll just officially get started here. As brands join the material revolution, a new wave of innovative fibers and fabrics are emerging. There is a growing awareness of synthetic and re-engineered fibers, biodegradable textiles, performance hemp, leather created from pineapple and mushrooms. It's clear that fiber innovation is moving from the margins to the mainstream. And according to a recent McKinsey report, 45% of apparel companies surveyed are looking to integrate more innovative bio-based materials, and over 67% of sourcing executives state that the use of innovative, sustainable materials will be important for their company. I forgot to introduce myself. So for those of you who I don't know, I'm Kelly Drennan. I'm the founder of Fashion Takes Action, which is a nonprofit organization based in Toronto, Canada, that I started in 2007 to advance sustainability in the fashion industry. We normally host WEAR in person every year since 2014. We've had to do a pivot now, of course, because of the pandemic. So we thank you for taking time out of your day. Today's session is going to highlight some of the disruptive material innovations that are a part of the ecosystem at Fashion for Good, a global platform for sustainable innovation. Today's presenter is Georgia Parker, Innovation Manager at Fashion for Good. Georgia orchestrates brand and innovator collaborations in areas of the supply chain related to raw materials, wet and dry processing, and circular business models. And today she is joining us from London, England. Welcome, Georgia.
Thanks for the fabulous introduction, Kelly, and I'm pleased to be here.
I'll turn off my mute. I'll mute myself, and
okay, well, hi everyone. It's great to be here. And without further ado, I'd love to talk to you about Fashion for Good, and most importantly, some of the amazing innovators we're working with in the raw materials space. So this picture shows our headquarters in Amsterdam, but we actually operate globally and launched our South Asia platform at the start of this year. But how does Fashion for Good work? So at the core of Fashion for Good, we focus on innovation and collaboration to drive change. On the one hand, our innovation platform is focused on industry change, working with innovators, brands, retailers, manufacturers, and investors to scale the most disruptive solutions across the fashion supply chain. But on the other hand, we're also a convener for change, and have the world's first interactive museum dedicated to sustainable fashion innovation. This is focused on engaging the wider public and educating them about what they can do to change fashion for good. Excitingly, we are now hosting digital tours, so if you're interested in exploring the museum, you can check out our website to learn more, and I can also share a link in the chat during the Q&A. To give you a bit of a flavour of what we do, I'd like to show you a video that's a bit of a sneak peek of behind the scenes of what we get up to on the innovation platform. So I'm hoping it will work without any technical difficulties. Fingers crossed. Here we go. If for some reason you weren't able to hear the sound or see anything, I can also share a copy of the video afterwards. So in the last 3 years, we've established ourselves as the go-to place for sustainable fashion innovation. And we're really proud of all the foundational work that's taken place. So I wanted to briefly share some highlights of what that looks like on our journey so far. We're a collective of 20 corporate partners, and we have a database of over 2,400 innovators. 300 of these are raw material innovators, and out of the 2,400, we now support 110 through both our global and South Asia programs. This has led to more than 60 pilots, often collaborative ones, and we've also catalyzed well over 130 million in funding for those innovators. We've also seen more than 35 technology readiness progressions, which is super important to know how the innovators are tracking through the innovation funnel, and to see that progress is being made. But who is behind these numbers? Well, change has to happen collectively and collaboratively, and we have a deeply committed partner group that we're extremely grateful to be working with. Pioneering brands from luxury, premium, e-commerce and sports, as well as upstream players such as Arvind and Archroma, who have the technical expertise to help us scale innovators throughout this space. And a little bit more detail on how the innovation platform works. So firstly, we scout and screen for innovators in alignment with our partners' priorities. As I mentioned before, this now is a database of over 2,400 across the whole supply chain. Secondly, we evaluate innovate as well, but evaluate these innovators. Is the innovation disruptive? What's the value proposition to the brand and manufacturer? What's their impact? How commercial are they? What's their technology readiness? And does it have the potential to scale? We're really focused on implementation. Based on these findings, we then select with our partners, innovators to participate in our programs. We then work with them to drive market validation, which can range from material testing to whole orchestrated and managed pilots. Really thinking about bringing together the triangle of brand, innovator, and manufacturer. Finally, we want to amplify this, share our learnings, and drive adoption at scale. So next, you can see an overview of all of the different innovators in our ecosystem. As you can see, they pretty much cover all areas across the supply chain. And if you're interested in learning more, you can check out the website, which has a great summary of each innovator and a link to their website where you can learn more. So where do we and our partners see technologies that can help us disrupt at scale? This gives an overview of areas where we scout across the supply chain. So looking in the raw material space, this would be around regenerated fibres, renewable polymers, alternative man-made cellulosics, lab-based and plant-based leather, in wet and dry processing, microbial pigments, digital printing, plasma and ultrasonic to foam-based dyeing. Within cut-made trim, we're looking at automation or mass customization. And then within retail, circular business models or visualization solutions. As we move towards the end of use, it's really around chemical recycling, product tagging and automated sorting, as well as overarching topics such as packaging, traceability, and transparency. Specifically this year, we also addressed issues such as digital acceleration. How can you accelerate towards a digital supply chain, both from design all the way through to the consumer? We also explored the topic of stock management. What can brands and their manufacturers do to deal with overstock in the supply chain? We released some Medium articles on this topic, and you can learn more about them there. I'll also share a link afterwards. But today we are focusing on my favorite topic, raw material innovators. So first up, we have AlgaeKnit. They were part of batch 3 of our accelerator program. They're a clean textile company founded by designers who are using kelp to make products that clean up the ocean, absorb CO2, and eliminate plastic microfiber pollution. Their material is made from sustainable and rapidly renewable resources, and their fiber is smooth, super soft to feel, and cool to touch. Next up, we have Spinnova, who are based out of Finland and are part of our scaling program. They've developed an innovation that can turn wood pulp directly into fiber without harmful chemical processes. Instead, it uses a mechanical process inspired by the spinning of a spider's web. As an input, Spinnova used cellulose made from Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC, certified wood. This promotes responsible forestry. The cellulose is extracted into fiber, ready to be spun into yarn, and the fiber can be blended to create different types of fabric. Compared to conventional cotton, growing and production, Spinnova uses little energy and hardly any water. They recently announced the launch of their partnership with one of our partners' bestseller. So watch this space over the coming months to see what comes out. Then we have Galley. Galley engineers cotton in labs through the multiplication of cells directly into the cotton fiber, removing steps of traditional cotton farming. As a result, they can grow cotton without the use of pesticides or fertilizers, using considerably less water. Luciano and the team are based between Brazil and Boston. Then within the biosynthetic space, Mango Materials, who produces biodegradable biopolyester that can be used as a sustainable alternative to the present polyester utilized in the fashion industry. Microfibers from the biopolyester can be biodegraded in many environments, including landfills, wastewater treatment plants, and the oceans, which also helps to prevent microfiber pollution and contributes to a closed-loop bioeconomy for the fashion industry. Then we move to natural fiber welding. So natural fiber welding transforms abundant biodegradable natural fibers into high-performance products using their patented processing methods. The platform leverages existing resources within nature, including recycled cotton or waste materials, basically using them in a clean chemistries in a closed-loop system with energy-efficient automation. They actually have 2 product lines. So the one that you can see on the screen here is Claris, which is their recycled cotton that has the same performance characteristics as virgin cotton. And the second one is Mirum, which is 100% bio-based leather alternative made from waste feedstocks. What's super exciting about Mirum is that it's 100% bio-based, and a lot of alternative leathers are often blended with synthetic materials in order to be able to get them to perform in the way that they're expected to. And finally, we have Infinited Fiber Company that fits under that end-of-use chemical recycling category. Their technology enables the regeneration of cellulose-rich waste, including discarded textiles, used cardboard and straw, into high-quality cotton-like fibers that can be recycled over and over again. This enables them to preserve 100% of the quality and a fully circular business model for the textile industry. The team based in Finland have actually produced some products made from 100% recycled textiles waste, which is an amazing achievement. I think you can learn more about that on their website and see what those products look like. So the technologies I've just showed you are classified as hard tech. Hard tech include innovators and solutions that require the development of physical and capital-intensive assets, such as new machinery or product lines. In comparison, soft tech includes many digital solutions that are either business to business or business to consumer. This graph compares the time to scale for circular business models versus raw material solutions. Generally, innovators that are developing new materials scale at a slower pace due to longer lead times and the need to develop these technologies and integrate into the supply chains. This graph maps on the y-axis time and on the x-axis the different types of investors who are typically investing in the space. It shows that there are two phases or gaps that occur over the entire funding journey, where capital is least accessible and available. Though different in nature, both gaps are difficult for innovators to bridge, preventing technologies from reaching market scale and impact. The first gap, the technology gap, occurs between an innovation concept and the translation of it to a working prototype. The second gap in the funding journey, the commercialization gap, is the most pronounced and occurs as innovators grow from pilots to fully commercial scale. This gap can be up to 90% of an individual hard tech innovator's total funding journey from R&D to scaling. So what are some of the barriers that we see when it comes to investment and scaling these hard tech solutions? One is misaligned incentives within the fashion industry. Second one is around the limited awareness of the opportunity. Thirdly, the absence of a structured innovation process. Fourthly, lack of experience and technical expertise. Fifthly, incorrect perceptions regarding pricing and externalities. And finally, exclusivity coming at the wrong place and at the wrong time. So, all of these findings we published in a report together with BCG on financing the transformation in the fashion industry, which was launched at Davos earlier this year. What we came up with was a solution to how to solve this. Really, all stakeholders need to step up individually and collectively and display new behaviors. Most importantly, we concluded that a key ingredient to scale innovations and what we call targeted consortium projects, specifically in hard tech, where heavy R&D and capital expenditure is needed. You need to have key stakeholders coming together to move the needle for change. Innovators, brands, supply chain actors, investors, and funders, and then somebody essentially orchestrating all of this. So we did just that. We built the first of its kind consortium project in the fashion industry. This project launched about a month ago now, and essentially focuses on scaling up chemical recycling within cellulosic fibres. As you can see on this map, we have different stakeholders who fit into each of those different areas of this consortium, including Laudes Foundation, Burla Cellulose, Kering, PVH Corp, and Target. This is the first of its kind to help address the challenges around chemical recycling in the industry. The idea for this started in January of this year, and given the current circumstances, we're immensely proud of where we've come to today. Out of the intensive pre-screening exercise, we selected 5 innovators who will now be working towards producing fibres in the middle of next year. You can read more about this online and in our report, Coming Full Circle, Innovating Towards Man-Made Cellulosic Fibres. So alongside the launch of our chemical recycling project and the report I just mentioned, we have various other thought leadership pieces and reports which are available on our website. One exciting one that's in the pipeline will launch as part of BioFabricate's annual conference on December the 7th. We've co-authored with them a report titled Understanding Biomaterial Innovations, a primer for the fashion industry. This report provides the first comprehensive review of biomaterial technologies for fashion and collates learnings, insights, and vital impact areas from leading industry experts in the biofabrication space. It seeks to end confusion around different types of biomaterials, serving as a unifying and foundational reference for change and innovation across the supply chain. So keep an eye out for that, and hopefully keep an eye out for signing up to BioFabricate's conference. I think they should be sharing this in the coming weeks. In closing, I want to recognize the times we're in. I'd like to refer to Edward Lorenz, chaos theory, and the butterfly effect. When looking at COVID, the prevalent social injustice issues, as well as the looming threat of climate change, for example, the forest fires on the US West Coast, all these events highlight how interconnected our lives and all things related to sustainability and innovation really are. And what we hear from our partners is that despite, or maybe even because of this, they remain steadfast in their commitment to innovation and sustainability. Hearing this clearly highlights the importance of scaling innovation in a collaborative way. And this is really at the core of what Fashion for Good does: innovation and collaboration to drive system change. So I would like to say thank you for having me today. And I hope that you found this interesting, and I look forward to hearing your questions. I'll just stop sharing my screen so I can also see everyone's lovely faces again.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Georgia. So before we jump into, there's some questions for sure there. I'll just give a couple minutes more for people to digest what they've just learned and to add their questions into the Q&A. I just have a couple of questions for you. I'm curious for any of the startups that are joining us today on this call who are focused on either raw material solutions or transparency, waste, or circularity. What would you say are maybe your top 3 pieces of advice for them?
I think be really clear on what your USP is. Don't try and tackle everything overnight. Really understand what you want to offer and how that fits into the existing supply chain and who you want to work with. I think secondly, I would say understand both the potential upside and downside of your technology. So I think often, especially in sustainable innovation, innovators focus on just purely what their solution will offer without perhaps thinking about what the unintended consequences of scaling that solution would be. And I think by being really transparent, open, and honest from the offset, we've seen that's what really builds the best partnerships with our brand partners in this space. And thirdly, I think I would say apply to our Fashion for Good Accelerator if you have a very exciting technology, and then hopefully we can support through that. But I think also having a strong ecosystem, I suppose that's what's the benefit of the Fashion for Good program is. We support with mentoring, marketing advice, investor support, all of that sort of thing. And there's lots of platforms out there who are doing similar things. If you have something that's more suitable to the biotech space or something in that area. So I do think accelerator programs play an important role in helping innovators when they're early stage really formulate who they are and what they want to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And then on the other end, for the brands who have joined us today and who are interested in collaborating with a startup, where do they begin and how can they engage with Fashion for Good?
So I would say that if you're interested in working with startups in this space, that our website is a fantastic resource for looking at different innovators across the whole ecosystem. And because there's a link through to the website, you can actually just reach out and connect with them directly. I think that also we have a fantastic resources section on our website that's both useful for innovators or brands or people who are wanting to set up like a smaller brand, that basically lists like useful resources, links, reports, other things that we found useful along our journey. So I can also drop that link into the chat as well. I think as a brand, really have an understanding of what materials you're using and where you can have the biggest impact to change. A company like Adidas is probably always going to use synthetic fibers in some form or another because it's an athletic brand. So it makes sense that they make big commitments to transitioning all of their synthetic fibers to say 100% recycled polyester by 2024. On the other hand, you look at a company like Kering, and they're obviously using more natural fibers or animal fibers, and that's why they set key commitments that help them move towards more sustainable alternatives in that space. So I think if you're a brand wanting to look for more sustainable alternatives, look at what your material matrix is, and then identify innovators that best fit to help you address those challenges.
Wow, that's a great answer. So we talked about, scaling, and you mentioned some of the barriers, and we know that investment is definitely a big barrier. What would you say the role is of government in this, if any?
I think really important. So at the start of the global pandemic and when lockdown first hit us, at least within Europe, I think there were lots of questions around whether sustainability and innovation would remain at the forefront of brands and consumers' minds. And I touched on it at the end, but I think given everything that's been going on, it's clear that this is a priority now more than ever. And this actually comes from the consumer appetite and drive, but also from governments. You know, the European Union just released a new chemical policy where they're basically banning the use of PFCs and C6 chemistry within the fashion supply chain. You also see the French government implementing extended producer responsibility within the textile space. So when brands produce products, they're actually responsible for them at the end of use. And I think increasingly legislation and policy is going to get even stricter and stricter, that it actually makes business sense to drive innovation in this space. Otherwise, I think you're going to find yourself left behind and also in a challenging space when it comes to interacting with governments.
Right. Okay, my last question, and I'm sure it's probably some of our attendees want to know this too, but do you have a favorite innovator?
I feel like that would be saying I had a favorite child. So I think very, very tricky, but I think probably I would say maybe I have a favorite area, and I do love the raw material innovations, although even that makes me feel bad for some of the circular business model innovations I'm working with. I think it really comes down to looking at the different solutions that make sense within an ecosystem. So I think Spinova is amazing in the fact that they have this platform that could use different feedstocks. At the moment, they use waste feedstock, but wood pulp feedstock, sorry, but they could also work with agri-waste. But on the other hand, you think about Galley, who are engineering cotton in a lab, which is just like a whole entire new concept. So I think it'd be too difficult for me to say, unfortunately.
Well, and it's so interesting because, you know, microfibers are a huge growing concern, and having biodegradable biopolyester, I got really excited about hearing about them. So there's a lot happening. It's all very exciting. So we have about 15 minutes left in the session today. There are a number of questions. If you have any burning questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A function. Let's start with this question here from Marie. Hello, hi everyone. My startup, Positive Fibres, seeks to disrupt the status quo by being a brand for 100% compostable fashion only, with which we're creating an entire new category. All our products are made from bio-circular textiles only. What is your take on this from a consumer behaviors point of view? Are people ready for it? Great question.
I think that is a really good question. And I think what we've seen through this report and the interviews we've done when we've been exploring even the term like biofabricated or biomaterials is that I think consumers are just getting their heads around what it means, what bio means, or what recycled means. I think where greater transparency is needed is around like what percentage of bio content actually needs to be in a product in order for it to be called bio. Interestingly, the USDA has a huge variance on this across different project ranges, from 7% to 94%, I think it is. And within textiles, it only needs to have 20% bio content. So I think the consumer is ready, but I think also there needs to be perhaps better alignment in terms of what bio means in order to be making marketing claims.
So true. Okay, next up from Umberto, we have, is there an independent panel that objectively rates eco-friendly raw materials? Who do I trust when a product is marketed as environmentally sustainable?
So there's a lot of different certifications out there that are best suited depending on the material that you're looking at. And actually, I should have mentioned it earlier when you talked about useful resources for brands. There's a couple of platforms that I think are really good for both innovators and brands. One is Common Objective. So they have a really good overview of different materials in this space. And it's a really nice way to connect with like-minded individuals within this ecosystem. And they also have a good overview on the different material standards and bodies. The next one I would say is oh my gosh, a complete mind blank on it. Sorry.
Textile exchange?
Textile exchange was one of
Yes.
them, but oh yes, textile exchange, and also good on you. That was the one I was thinking.
Oh yeah,
and that's also for the consumers, where they get the brand rating across the different ecosystems. So I think good on you is a great one to look at. I think common objective is a really fantastic one. And also textile exchange, as you said, there's a lot of open source material that's available on there, and they have their different recycling standards, cotton standards, and things like that. The other one is Supply Compass, who have made a fantastic overview of standards and certifications. And I'm actually always telling the innovators that that's a really useful resource that they should look at, because Flora and her team have done an amazing job of really succinctly summarizing all of the different standards that are in that ecosystem. Absolutely. So I'd say good on you, textile exchange, common objective, and Supply Compass.
Awesome. Yeah, it is definitely, there's a lot, it's a murky space to be navigating your way through. So it's great to have those resources. Absolutely. Okay. Next question is from Lisa. Would you say that bio-based plastics such as PLA are a contributor to climate change, since they turn raw materials into plastics that will most likely interfere with the current recycling system and therefore need to be incinerated?
I think that there is further understanding that's needed around the role and impact of biosynthetics within existing ecosystems. I wouldn't say that the recycling infrastructure or technologies are scaled enough that this would be a challenge in its current form, because I think it's like less than 1% of textiles get recycled back into textiles. And most of it at the moment is mechanical recycling, where that's largely cotton and wool and needs to be almost 100% feedstocks in order to be recycled. I do think that it is something that we need to consider when we're scaling up these different solutions. You know, if you have polyester chemical recycling at scale, what role will these biosynthetics play in it? I actually think it will come down to probably applications in different product types. And I think it's about creating a reverse logistics ecosystem by implementing traceability solutions such as product tagging, where you really be able to track what's in a garment all the way through from inception to consumer use. And we actually just launched a project with Zalando and circular.fashion on this, where you can actually now buy Zalando products where they're tagged with circular.fashion's ID tags and learn all about what's in those materials and products.
That's the same as the Eon ID? Is that the circular ID? Or is that different?
No, that's circular.fashion is a different innovator, but a similar concept in terms of like product traceability and identity.
Yeah, it's so exciting. There's just I mean, we could do like a 4-hour session at least with you just on all the different innovators.
Oh yeah, I was thinking that when I was listing out all of the resources, for sure.
Oh, it's so exciting. Oh, here's a question from Claire in Edmonton. Hey, Claire. I love Unbelts is Claire's brand. She says, I'm a brand looking to integrate innovative biocircular textiles. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, into our existing designs. We make belts from elastic webbing. Our biggest challenge is making the leap from discovering innovative materials to finding suppliers actually willing to integrate those materials into their processing. Are there any resources you'd recommend for connecting with existing manufacturers of textiles using these technologies? Thanks for this talk, learning a lot.
I think the one that comes to mind off the top of my head is Textile. And I think that is another innovator that basically has set up a platform where they connect manufacturers and like smaller brands together, like more innovative and sustainable manufacturers together. So I'd recommend also checking out Textile and seeing if there's a way to connect via there. And common objective as well might be a good place to look for that. I can also share a link to that. I'm seeing some people asking for links, so maybe I can do that as well as we go.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And that's exciting, Claire, to hear.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, just a shout out to Unbelts, because they're also a certified B Corporation. So very proud of this growing movement in Canada, which is great.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks for putting those links in. Next is Kelly. And hi, Kelly. I also know Kelly. How do you see the growing industrial hemp market impacting the future of textiles? Knowing it uses less water than cotton, but still has dramatic environmental impacts. How can this fast emerging fiber learn from mistakes of the past?
I wouldn't actually say that hemp is a fast emerging fiber because it's actually been around for hundreds of years. It's just that there's been a lot of innovations in recent years around the way that the hemp is processed. So conventionally, it often came out as like a more coarse or rough fiber, but now there's lots of innovations in cottonization, which is basically where you put it through a similar supply chain process to cotton. And it means that you're able to get a softer material out the other side. So one of our innovators, Bear Fiber, is actually working on that. I do think you're right, though, as well, with the legalization of hemp in the US and also increasingly in India, there's pockets of hemp legislation. Sorry, not and Canada too, is it legal?
Oh, yeah.
It's been legal there for ages, hasn't it? Yeah.
Well, a year or so, yeah, but cannabis is actually legal here now.
So I think that now we are seeing a growing hemp market for sure. So I think that likely there will be a need for standards and certifications across the hemp space in order to make sure that it's not replicating mistakes made in the past.
That's true. And I know hemp was brought up in one of our earlier sessions today, and the Textile Exchange probably does have some information as well. It's just, it doesn't make up a huge share of the marketplace yet. Let's hope that it does eventually. There's another great company just who spoke at WEAR last year, Hemp Black, and they do a lot of performance hemp as well. So also maybe check them out if you're interested in hemp. Nice. Okay, next question is from Eva. Hi, Georgia, great presentation, very innovative projects. What does Fashion for Good recommend to their partners they support in terms of communication to the consumer to make the value of sustainability of bio-based raw material solutions understandable?
I think it's a really tricky one because you're often trying to explain quite complex technologies and processes to people who might not even know like what viscose is. So you say like Spinova is replacing cotton and viscose, but what is viscose or what is tensile? So I think that often what we do is work with the innovators. I mentioned this at the start, to be really clear on what their USP is. And then I think a lot of the solutions we're working with are B2B, so that the brands would then be looking to implement them in their supply chain. So I think then what you see is partnerships emerging where the brands often support with that marketing story and how to position it to the consumer. But I do think not overcomplicating it and trying to explain all aspects of the technology up front, I think helps people to understand that really well.
Thanks. Okay, we have time for a few more questions, which is great because there are many. So Linda wants to know, one of the materials you presented biodegrades in methane gas. Knowing that methane is also a greenhouse gas responsible for global warming, does it really improve the environmental footprint of the conventional alternative?
It's a very good question, and it does actually, because you're essentially recapturing those carbon gases. You can do that in two ways. So mango obviously does it through a bacterial fermentation process where they feed the bacteria the methane gas. But other methods of using renewable carbon could also be through captured carbon utilization. So I think what they're basically doing then is taking the carbon from the atmosphere. So the methane gas that mango uses actually comes from wastewater treatment plants that would be coming off the treatment plant anyway. So instead of using feedstocks like sugar or molasses or sugar beet or corn or things like that, they're actually using something that's already a waste product that exists, and then they use that to feed their bacteria. So I think with all of these things, you do need to understand the environmental impact, and that's where LCAs and impact assessments come into play. But I think overall, from what we've seen, they do have a better environmental footprint than obviously synthetic virgin polyester that's coming out of the ground.
Yeah. Okay, this kind of we touched on already, but let's just see here about, do you see any gaps between the current laws and regulations and the industry innovations, and how or what is being done? I think we kind of mentioned, the role that government played, or plays in this space. Um, but are there any examples of your innovators perhaps engaging with policymakers, lawmakers? Um, are they getting in front of them? Are
There
they,
is something in the pipeline that I don't think I'm allowed to share
ah,
yet because I don't think
okay.
it's public, but watch this space on Fashion for Good and one of their innovators and a bigger consortium project. I think also we see some of our brands working with their governments as well as part of big consortiums and ecosystems, especially in the bio space as well, that I think some interesting things to keep an eye out there as well in the pipeline. So
Sure.
definitely we see that the Horizon 2020 was obviously an amazing pool of funding that some of the innovators were lucky enough to get funding off the back of, and are now working on projects related to that.
Great. And yeah, I mean, even here in Canada, our government is pretty supportive, I would say, of innovation and environmental solutions. So we're fortunate enough to be actually currently doing a study on textile recycling uh, funded by our federal government. So if you're, yeah, it's always, I encourage everybody to see if there's ways, if there's levers that you can pull to kind of get into in front of whether it's policymakers or granting bodies. So what message would Kim wants to know, what message would your organization give to youth who are making fashion purchasing decisions?
I would say buy less, and I would say buy secondhand. But if not, I think the Good On You app is an amazing app for understanding different brands and who's out there. And I actually, on the Fashion for Good website, so as part of the museum, we actually have throughout the space different commitments you can sign up to change your behavior, to basically make fashion a force for good. And on the link that I just sent, you can actually read about some of those actions. So it might be like, buy nothing new for 30 days, like swap with your friends, love your stuff for longer, try and repair products. But I think really actually also just doing your homework. So if there's a brand you really love, dig into their sustainability policy. Maybe they are a really big brand, but they're doing fantastic stuff in this space and really trying to do a lot to change the industry. The brands we work with are leaders in these areas, and I think have an amazing impact and role to play within these ecosystems. So I would say if you can't find the questions, then you can ask. You can always tweet your favorite brand and ask for more information if you feel like you can't find it on the website.
And also, Kim, just if you're not familiar with Fashion Takes Action's work, we have a school program for youth aged 8 to 17 called My Clothes, My World. And we've been delivering it since 2014 to now over 20,000 students. And we're in the process of digitizing the program, which means that we can actually scale it. So happy to connect with you as well. And share some more information about that after this chat. So we're about to wrap up, but I want to just maybe get one more question in here. Okay, how about from Sheena? Would an e-commerce platform that allows manufacturers to sell sustainable textiles directly to independent designers be something that your accelerator is looking for?
Often we do look for more B2B solutions that can be implemented within existing supply chains. But I think it's always worth applying and seeing. It might be that there's a fit with the current batch. I think in those instances, I would say that's where platforms like Common Objective really come into play, where I think there's a lot of smaller designers or brands who are on there who might want to work together in terms of connecting with products or fabric rolls and things like that. And before we wrap up, I would do one last plug, and I would say if you are interested in visiting the museum, I would definitely suggest doing a digital tour. We also run workshops and different events, and actually a upside of everything that's going on, you touched on it at the start, Kelly. Obviously, it's an awful situation, but it has meant that we're able to engage with such a wider audience than we normally would be able to do. So definitely recommend taking advantage of it. We have a new theme that recently launched. So some really exciting companies and brands there.
Well, that's so great. Thank you again for joining us today. And thanks to all of you for attending, and to our sponsors this month, Kendor Textiles, Lenzing, and Eco Textile News. Without their support, we really couldn't be able to offer the Wear series at no cost. So thank you also for showing up today. We hope that you will share the recordings far and wide with your networks. We'll be sending you links to that sometime next week. Our next Wear series will be taking place on November 18th, so mark your calendars for that. And our theme is going to be equity and inclusivity in the fashion industry. If you're interested in sponsoring or speaking at that, feel free to send me an email. I can be reached at kelly@fashiontakesaction.com. And you can also stay up to date on all of our latest news, information, and events by following us on social media. We're at fashiontakesaction.com, or sorry, Fashion Takes Action. And on our website, you can sign up for our free newsletter. So thanks again for everybody for joining. Thank you, Georgia, and all of our sponsors. And we hope to see you again next month.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.